Hello. The date today is 10/16/2020, and I would like to make this video to predict who is going to win the United States presidential election. If you've stumbled across this video, I'm sure you're already aware of heavy media and polling bias within today's political sphere. But I'd like to take the time to look at potential outcomes that can happen for specific states that will determine the presidential election. I think it's important to note that we have to look at this in a logical view. We have to look at this in an unbiased view, and we have to look at this in a way that emotions aren't going to take effect here. With this out of the way, I'm going to put an image on the screen that will show states that I believe are of importance, and they will decide the election most likely. So, as you can see, there are states that are in yellow, and there are states that are in tan. Now, the states that are in blue and red, those are believed to be decisive. Those are going to go that way. But the states in yellow, I'd just like to talk about momentarily before moving into the states that I believe will really matter, which of course are Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So the first state that needs to be talked about briefly is Arizona. A lot of people think that that's going to flip blue. I don't think so. Joe Biden is only up around 4 points, and statewide, you give a 5 to 10% margin of error. I think Trump will win that at 1 to 2 points, maybe 3. The point here is that, California transplants, Mexican migrants, disgruntlement within the GOP, it's very unlikely to flip the state blue this year. Now, could that happen in the future? Yes, maybe. It has in the past, right? But other than that, I believe that Trump will win Arizona in 2020. The second state that needs to be talked about is Minnesota. Now, while it's likely Minnesota is not going to flip red this year, as it has never gone red since 2000 at least, it's unlikely that it will happen this year as well. However, I do think that there is something of note that needs to be taken into account. Hillary Clinton and Biden are both unpopular candidates, you could say. And of course, Donald Trump is too. But you have to understand that in Minnesota, there are 5,640,000 white people. And by only 1% of that, there's 56,400 people right there. In 2016, Hillary Clinton got the popular vote with 1,367,716 people. That comes to 46.44%. Now, Donald Trump got 1,322,951. That's 44.92%. If Donald Trump has even swayed 1% of the white vote, or white demographic really, to vote for him, that's it. He's won the state. Now, do I think that Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton are going to get the same numbers of the popular vote? Well, they're both very unfavorable. Compared to Obama, who won by, I think, 52% or something like that, hundreds of thousands of votes ahead of his challengers. I do think it's possible that Donald Trump could win. Now, is it likely? No. But it is a minority position that can have potential. And I think that's something you can't discount. So, at least for now, I do believe that Minnesota will go blue. The third state that needs to be talked about is Maine. Now, Donald Trump is not going to win Maine, at least I don't believe so, but he could most certainly win a district, and he could subsequently get 1 or 2 electoral votes. Now, the only reason that I'm really bringing this up is so that when I turn it blue on the map, people do not say, oh, well, where's the district? That doesn't really factor into the election results that are going to happen on election day, but I do think it's fair to give people the understanding that Donald Trump could most certainly win a district in that state. The final yellow state that needs to be talked about is Florida, and I believe that Trump will win. I believe he'll win by 2 to 3 points, and I don't think that that's something out of a fairy tale. He won in 2016 pretty heavily. He's going to probably win in 2020 pretty heavily. The media bias that you see is very disruptive. They have Joe Biden, up at 1.4 points right now, or 1.6 even. And the reason for that is that right-wingers, GOP, Trump voters, conservatives, they don't, on polling, like studies have been done, they don't like answering polls. And, you have to take into account probably 10% of the voter base. So the reality is that Joe Biden is down in Florida. He will most likely lose Florida. And you can get into the topic of shy voters. You can get into the topic of the silent majority. You can get into the topic of, polls being disrupted because the right doesn't want to answer them correctly or truthfully or even talk to people from there. But regardless, the only polling predictor that I really can even believe is true is Trafalgar, because Trafalgar has been right on numerous occasions, and I don't believe that they're throwing everything to the wind now just to give wrong answers or wrong predictions. So I believe that Trump will win Florida. So now this wraps up the 4 yellow states that needed to be briefly talked about. The final states that really matter, that will decide the election, assuming all these states go these specific ways that are on the screen right now, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Those are the 3 that will matter, and they will decide the election. So with the yellow states out of the way, I'd like to talk about the theory of him just needing one more spelled state, Trump. If he wins Pennsylvania, he wins the election. If he wins Michigan, he wins the election. If he wins Wisconsin, he wins the election, assuming he gets a district in Maine and he doesn't lose one in Nebraska. I think the left, the pundits, the polls, they're overplaying Joe Biden in these states. Trump just needs one. Now, if he loses all 3, he loses the election, assuming all the other states play fair. They play by what I've designated. He will lose the election if he loses all 3. But in the terms of chances, in the terms of 3 chances, 3 strikes, you're out. Trump just needs one. The first state that needs to be talked about in terms of statistics is Pennsylvania. Trump is currently behind Biden in 5.1 points. We'll just say 5. That's at the threshold of the limitation to the shy voter point spread that will most likely have Trump lose the state. I think it's fair to say that some of these polls, most of these polls, are probably biased, but even Trafalgar has Trump down by 2 points. So that being said, Trump can win the state. It depends on how far the West is going to come out after him. It depends on how far the Central is going to come out for him. Really, it depends on how Philadelphia is going to react to Biden. Biden has his campaign headquarters, I believe, in Pennsylvania. The West is down 10 points from 20 for Trump. The whole point here is that even though there are bad factors coming out every week of how bad Trump is doing in Pennsylvania, it's not a doom and gloom type situation. The points you see now at 5.1, they're going to go down to 3. They may go down to 2. And it will be a very tight race. All I can say is that don't be surprised at either candidate winning Pennsylvania. It's not some landslide victory here. The next state that needs to be talked about is Wisconsin. It ends up 4.6 points. Now, again, you can't really trust some of these polls, but, Trafalgar even has them at +2. So the understanding that Biden will win the state is, again, at a 55-45. However, if you see a tightening of 3 points, 2 points away, Trump will most likely win by election day. He may win by a very slim margin, but he would win. And the thing about that is that you have to look back to the riots. You have to look back to the destruction of the cities and things like that. People aren't just going to forget that. People are going to be very PO'd about that. And you look to the states that were most affected from those. There's going to be significant fluctuation in how someone's going to view the left. And that's not to be biased, okay? That's going to be saying that's a real indication or that's a real factor that ties into how someone's going to vote or not vote at all. Whereas you would vote for Trump, right, if you didn't like the riots, if you didn't like the destruction and the mayhem, or you didn't support it. And that's not to, disparage any political leanings that those riots may or protests really may have had. The point here is that Wisconsin was affected, specifically in Kenosha. The final thing that needs to be said about Wisconsin is that Trump is winning. in mail-in voting. The ballots requested at 1.5 million are 37 to 41 GOP favor, and mail-in returns are at 37 to 41. I think this is a good indication that Trump has a good chance. Now, does it mean that all the non-party affiliated are going to vote for Trump? No. In fact, it could be that they're going to also favor the Dems at 1 to 2 points. But this is actually disastrous for the left. Let's assume that the Dems get their 37%. Let's assume that the GOP gets their 41%. Let's assume that the Dems get 12% from the MPA. Let's assume that the GOP gets 10%. Let's assume that mail-in voting is tied. The point here is that early voting, the Dems have said they're in favor of. Mail-in voting, the Dems have said they're in favor of. The point matters on election day. The GOP said that they're going to vote roughly 50% in person. The Dems said that they're going to vote 30%. Now that's awful. That's a 20 percentage point lead. And if the GOP does in fact show up on election day, if in fact the mail-in voting is tied, this is going to be disastrous. I really do think, instead of a 45-55, Trump really has a 50-50 shot at picking up Wisconsin. And although I will not be marking Wisconsin red, it is of no surprise, it is of no misunderstanding. There is a significant chance Trump can win the state. The final state that needs to be talked about is Michigan. And to preface it, I'd just like to say again that if Trump wins Wisconsin, he wins the election, assuming he gets a district in Maine. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, he wins the election. The whole point here is that I'm more of a cynic. And although I think there could be a chance that Trump wins 2 of the 3 states, I'm just going to pick one. And I believe that Michigan is the final state that Trump will win, putting him at 275 to Biden's 263. Whatever the case may be, the electorate count will be around 270 to 280s, high 280s at most. This is going to be a very slim election, but Trump will win. And that's my prediction based on the understanding that the Rust Belt is the key here. Why do I think Michigan will win for Trump? Even though the polls have him down 7 points, most of these polls are heavily based upon Democrat leanings. But the one thing that shocked me was that Trafalgar has Trump at 1 point above Biden in Michigan. He's 1 point above. And although that was taken on 10/14, so that was a week ago, I think it's fair to say that it's serious. All 3 of these states, every single one, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, are tight races. And the only reason that I'm choosing Michigan is because he's up red. He's up. And in fact, if you look at early voting, if you look at where he's gone in terms of mail-in voting, he is up by 2 points for the GOP. He's up in mail-in voting. Although, early voting favors Democrats and heavily Democrat areas, this is a key here that will win Trump the election. You can look at Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. All 3 of these are able to be switched out and replaced with another state. I will say again, he wins Wisconsin, he wins the election. He wins Michigan, he wins the election. He wins Pennsylvania, he wins the election. Trump is favored. I'll leave you with one final thought. This is my election prediction. This is just based on statistics of chance. It's based on the understanding that the polls are very heavily favored toward the left instead of the right. It's based upon the fact that Trump shy voters is a real thing. It's based upon the fact that we are in a 1 in 3 probability of Trump winning. Does he have a good shot? Does he have a chance to win any of these 3 states? Because if he does, if he has the potential to win Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania, Trump will get another term. Thank you for listening to my prediction. I know that this is, just a fun thing that people do, so I wanted to do it too. You can look back a few years from now, see if you were right or wrong, and that's always fun. It's always fun to see how off you were or how close you were. And although I think that this is the final outcome, that doesn't mean that it will be. And whatever happens in 2020, I hope it's for the best. I hope we don't derail off of American values of freedom of speech, of the Second Amendment, of equality, or rather meritocracy. I want to say that wherever you are on election day, whatever you're doing, after the results come in, after the inauguration, everything like that, try not to be so hateful. Try not to be so angry. Try not to be so focused upon politics. Because the understanding here is that even though politics occurs, if you let it consume your life, if you let it just destroy everything around you that you love, and all you can do is see vitriol and negativity, that's not a life that's going to be very worth living. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry for giving you a little lecture at the end. I hope you all stay safe, and God bless.